Well, hi everyone, Ron Vaillant here. Hope you're doing well. I'm going to be sharing a video here. It's based on a video that went viral in regards to Jeff Rath is going to be going with a delegation of Alberta power players down to visit with the Trump administration about the idea of Alberta becoming the 51st state. So I thought I'd share this with you folks in case you don't know about it, just to let you know that this is up in Canada and could potentially be something that would be a very big development. So right now, all it is just basically an inquiry, reaching out phase, I guess, with these people. And shout out to Rachel for having done that. So the video that we're going to have on this is basically the second video. It's like an interview with Jeff. So it'll be good for your information. But one thing that people need to know is that Jeff is part of the Alberta Prosperity Project. And the first I came across that is basically talking about Alberta separation and the legitimacy of it and everything else like that. And I was at a meeting, and then someone handed me one of their, it wasn't a brochure, just cardstock, one thing, like a poster thing, but it was heavy and it was very well done, professionally done with graphics and everything else like that. So it was impressive, high gloss. And so I found out about it. There was a lot of money behind it. It was kind of a big endeavor and professionally run. And so it caught my attention. This happened, after the Wexit movement was happening in Alberta in 2019. And so anyhow, I went and I looked up some of their stuff, and I even posted Dennis Moudry talking about their stuff, and I posted on 2 years ago, basically. You can go look it up on the channel APP, I forget, Introduction or something like that. And all of is good. There's a couple things I didn't like because he was actually echoing the same sort of talking points, that Peter Downing of Wexit said, and David Borkman of when he ran with the Independence Party of Alberta back in 2019, 18-ish or whatever. And they all had the same talking point, is that with an independent Alberta, that they would actually go and use the UN to force BC to have a pipeline go through their province in order to get tidewater. And for me, that's an absolute no-go because, the UN really should be defunded at minimum and dismantled, at best. And not because it's not a good idea to have nation states talk to each other. That's all the good premise, that is on. But there's so many UN agendas that are in play now and it's all to be able to set up a parliamentary system of government by the UN for the entire world. And the stages have been set for that. In the 90s, I believe it was, a world court was set up in order to be able to start doing that sort of a thing. So we're all marching towards this new world order, I guess, that you hear them talking about, and that is a global governance system going on. So anyhow, all these Dennis Moudry, Peter Downing, and Dave, they were all talking about using this thing with the UN, and to me that was just like a no bueno, like that's. But anyhow, so that's what they were doing. But I did share the video regardless because there was other things involved there, and and people were investigating the whole idea of Alberta becoming, its own independent country, right? And at that time, and probably up until this time, pre-annexation, news was maybe I would estimate 20% of Albertans would be interested in a separate Alberta because Eastern Canada has treated us so badly. And one of the things that has happened with that is the whole thing of sharing the revenue of Alberta with the rest of the provinces, the have-not provinces, including Quebec, which doesn't have to count for its revenue from all the electrical proceeds that they're generating there for their power plants. And so Albertans feel ripped off by that. And really it was Stephen Harper and Pierre Poilievre and those guys who set the limits or the formula for what that is. So people think that if they're in Alberta that they're going to vote for Pierre Poilievre, he's going to be pro-Alberta, but he's basically said that he's going to continue on with these transfer payments with the same formula, and so that formula can change. It can be reduced down to zero, and they won't do it. So anyhow, I'm getting sidetracked on that, but this whole issue of having Alberta be its own country, and now the 51st state is in play in a serious way, actually, now. And so I would say that probably 40% of Alberta would be in favor of becoming the 51st state. That would be, probably 90% of the people who live on farms and ranches and in the rural setting. And, when you go into the city, you're going to have a lot more NDP and Liberal people and whatnot who would not go that way. But that's just kind of like the demographics of the vote, I would think. But anyhow, they got this group going down to visit and talk about this whole idea of Alberta becoming the 51st state at first, and go that direction. But this APP, so I shared that thing with Dennis Moudry talking about their platform and whatnot, and then I looked more into it. They basically had a proposed constitution for a new Alberta, a free and independent Alberta. So you go through all of the whole process of becoming a free country, which is almost impossible, but let's say it did happen. Then you have this constitution that they're proposing, and as I looked at that constitution, then I found some problematic issues with it. Okay, so this is section 5.2 of their constitution that they proposed for Alberta. And I don't think anyone would actually catch this. I mean, it has to be someone who's deep into this topic like myself to be able to pick up and sound the warning bell. But anyhow, so it says that the United Nations Declarations on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples is recognized as both constitutionally binding and binding as an expression of both customary and conventional international law. And then 5.3 says that the right of Indigenous ownership of resources in Alberta, including mines and minerals, is recognized, and a meaningful resource revenue sharing mechanism will be constitutionally entrenched. Now, if you're new to UNDRIP, it's United Nations Declarations on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. It's a document talking about all the rights that they should have, and the sell is that they don't have rights in Canada, when really they have way more rights than you and me, But so they put this whole thing in there, and this is not just by happenstance or by accidents or whatever. This is very intentional that they have this in this new Alberta, independent Alberta thing. And when you have to look at UNDRIP through the lens of Article 26, because Article 26 says that the Indigenous have the right to the lands, territories, and resources to which they have traditionally owned, occupied, or used. So that's what's going on in Canada all over, is that all of it's being claimed, saying that this is our land, our territory, we've used it. You even see it in the Oilers hockey game, preambles. They say that we're on treaty land, all of these are land claims. And to have this into their thing was, a monster situation. And so to me, it was like, what's the point of having Alberta go through all of the whole thing of becoming independent, only to have it, UNDRIP entrenched, and all of Alberta basically become, Indian land. We would just be renters, or, and we would have to be nice enough that they would allow us to be on their territory, because that's a whole nother issue where this is going, is that if they don't like you being in their territory, they can tell you to leave. And if the government's behind it and they force you to leave, well, you can't take your house and your business with you. You just basically go with your shirt on your back.
This will be completed. We have so much work to do, but we've been thinking about this, and we think it's absolutely critical. It's not good enough just to have policies and governance for a new government. It's not good enough. We have so much work to do, but we've been thinking about this, and we think it's absolutely critical. It's not good enough just to have policies and governance for a new government. It's not good enough just to have bylaws that are robust, that hold people accountable. You really need to fix a number of things. And in that new constitution, for example, we can move away from what we currently have, which is a legal system, and actually have a justice system.
So anyhow, I saw that and I thought, oh my goodness, this is horrible. And then I thought, I thought I should maybe tell people about it, and I did make a video, and I thought, oh man, if I share this video, it's going to just cause a lot of stir and commotion. I'm not going to be a very popular guy. And so I thought about it, long and hard there. Well, not too long, but I mean, I thought about the consequences. But, I'm not here for a popularity contest. I'm here to share what's going on. And so I went ahead and I shared that, and it caused a bit of a stir. And the first pushback was people just making comments in the comments section and whatnot, and saying, well, you're kind of a traitor to this situation, and you shouldn't be talking about it. It's a great organization, and all these other kind of things, And I'm not disputing that per se. I was just that this whole issue of having UNDRIP enshrined into an Alberta constitution is very problematic, and it's in there for a reason. Someone put it there. So who's behind the APP, and who's behind putting this thing in there? It was a problem. So, and then you had Chris Scott from the Whistle Stop Cafe. He's part of the APP, and he did a rebuttal video. And at first in the video, he says, well, it's good that Ron's challenging things and whatnot, but he couldn't stand watching it for more than a few minutes, which I don't blame him. But so then he just didn't, really watch the whole thing. And really what the point of the video was talking about, if Alberta was to go ahead and separate and have this thing in there, would it be a Trojan horse? Because we're going to end up having things all messed up. And so I called it, in that video title, it basically Alberta Prosperity Project. And I asked the question, is it a Trojan horse? And the whole point is not that the APP is a Trojan horse, but it would be a Trojan horse if Alberta ended up with UNDRIP as part of its constitution, right? So then he goes on talking about this whole thing, goes on all about the virtues of the APP. He didn't even get the point. He didn't even understand the thing that I was really talking about, And in the end, he kind of calls me, some derogatory thing like a fool or an idiot or something like that. I'm not too sure what it was. But so anyhow, that was pushed back there. Dennis Moudry, made comments in the comment section. You had Bob Leon. He saw that, and it was a concern to him, and kind of partially responsible for him leaving the APP. Now, Bob, if you're watching this, feel free to add into the thing. I'm going by memory now. It's been a couple of years. And then 3 weeks after they did damage control, they went and had a Facebook Live. I managed to catch it partway through, but in there, they're just talking about, they kind of backtrack basically. They thanked, me for, Dennis Moudry talked about it. He thanked me for bringing up these issues about, the UN, and they denounced that they would, not be using the UN, and they backtracked on that, and that they wouldn't go ahead and install UNDRIP, so they just did all this backpedaling. So it did cause a stir. Even Mark Friesen was upset with me. He went and made a video, he was upset that I called it a Trojan horse, not that the APP I was saying was a Trojan horse, but just the fact that I used that language and whatnot. And so anyhow, it was just a bit of a thing. And so the reason I bring all of that up here is that so that that this delegation going down there is affiliated with the APP. And I've went onto their website. I don't see that they have their proposed Alberta Constitution on their website anymore. They don't even show who their board members are anymore or who their other people were, because I had shown that as well. You don't really know what's going on there behind the scenes. So keep your head on a swivel, so don't just go and buy into the Alberta 51st state through the APP. If it does go that far, you have to be able to find out where they're heading, what direction they are going in. So anyhow, that's about it for that. Alberta, is a lot of farmers and ranchers are talking about the 51st state over here. So it's a go. And the other thing too is that, just to add and to end, is you have all of these politicians saying, absolutely, we will never become the 51st state. And politicians, how they operate, they make you think they're going in a certain direction, and then in the end, they totally flip-flop. We see it over and over again. And then even Jagmeet Singh says, no, we're never going to become a 51st state. And to me, with anything that Jagmeet Singh says, to go ahead and do, you do the opposite, because whatever he does, just turns to dust. But and then Mark Carnage, he was talking about, make no mistake, this is going to be a very hard battle, or, we're going to have to really dig into the trenches and everything else like that. And all of this tells me, gives me an indication that this is kind of almost pre-planned. This whole thing, it's all political theater, and something is afoot, big time. And they're going to get, Canadians to fight back with tariffs, and it's just going to decimate us and bring us to our knees. And all, that would help fulfill, the World Economics Forum's video that they shared, that by 2030 alone, nothing. So big things are afoot, I think, myself. So anyhow, we'll share the video and you can go from there. All right. Thanks. Bye.
A prominent Alberta lawyer is organizing a delegation to go to Washington, D.C. and pitch U.S. President Donald Trump on Alberta statehood. I posted a video to that effect yesterday, and it has gone totally viral with 5.4 million impressions within 24 hours of it being posted, leaving us all to think maybe this idea isn't so fringe after all. I'm Rachel. Welcome back to Rachel Parker. All right, everyone, welcome to episode 1 of Rachel Parker. I am joined by the man behind the idea, Alberta lawyer Jeff Rath of Rath & Company. So first and foremost, Jeff, maybe you could just give us a brief synopsis. What is it exactly that you are proposing to do?
Well, what we're proposing to do, first and foremost, is to free Alberta from governance by idiots in Ontario and Quebec. So I've been involved with an organization called the Alberta Prosperity Project for a number of years. Interestingly, we're now up to over 60,000 members, which is more members than the United Conservative Party of Alberta at this point. We're a number of the organization's goal is to educate Albertans on the benefits of independence, free of the structural problems caused by Canadian federalism, which has effectively turned Alberta and Albertans into colonized citizens of, into a colony of Quebec and Ontario, which we're all sorely fed up with. And, the impetus for all of this, of course, was, Justin Trudeau starting a trade war with the United States. And we all think it was done intentionally so that he can cling to power, and so the Liberal government in Ottawa will have an excuse to run up another $1 trillion in debt that's going to be paid for by hardworking Albertans, so that they can get reelected when no trade war needed to happen. Effectively what President Trump was saying was that Canada has been freeloading off of the United States for decades, which is undeniable when you look at the fact that our current NATO spending is 1% of GDP, or 1.1 or 2% of GDP, when the treaty commitment is 2%, and then given the global situation, it should be closer to 3, which is 3 or 4, which is what President Trump is asking for. So rather than acknowledging the truth of that, apologizing to President Trump for the fact that Canada's been freeloading off of the U.S. for decades, and that we've effectively become a military protectorate of the United States of America, and apologizing for that. Instead, Trudeau provokes this stupid trade war to help himself and the Liberals get reelected. So, of course, as an Albertan who has been more than fed up with the degree to which Alberta has been mistreated, and we've literally had hundreds of billions of dollars siphoned out of this province to go to Quebec to fund social services in Quebec that Albertans could only dream of. Well, Quebec runs surplus budgets, and Alberta is continuing to have to borrow money to build hospitals, pay our doctors, pay for our roads, and the rest of it. Well, we're being sucked dry by by Quebec as a so-called have-not province. We're just fed up. And then what we find after Trudeau provokes this trade war with President Trump at Mar-a-Lago, what we find is that people in Ontario and Quebec are so idiotic, they don't even know where their oil comes from. So they're suggesting that, we'll teach Donald Trump a lesson. We're going to shut off Alberta oil. notice that Doug Ford isn't saying, hey, we'll teach them a lesson in the integration of the North American auto industry. We'll shut down all Ontario parts plants for 2 or 3 days and cause all of the supply chains to come to a crashing halt. Oh, no, no, no. We'll shut down Alberta oil, right? Harming our citizens and our economy, because that's the right of Ontario to kick Albertans in the teeth anytime they feel like it. So, of course, the humorous thing about that is that somebody quietly points out to both Trudeau and Ford, who thought that this was a really good idea, well, you can't really do that. Well, what do you mean? Well, all of your oil comes through Line 9. It comes from the United States, right? So they're so stupid, they don't even know that their own oil comes from the United States. And if you shut off the oil out of Alberta, that they've effectively shut off the oil to Eastern Canada. And these are the people that are purporting to govern us. So, myself and a number of other Albertans have decided that enough is enough. We're tired of being governed by complete idiots. And we're at a unique point in history with the newly elected Trump administration to, send a delegation to Washington to discuss with the Trump administration their support for Alberta independence, and to gauge the level of support in the Trump administration for an independent Alberta free of Canada, to gauge their support for Alberta either becoming a U.S. territory or a U.S. state. And I think the internal discussions are that the independent Republic of Alberta as a U.S. territory, like the British Virgin or the U.S. Virgin Islands, Guam, or Puerto Rico, is probably the best way to go, and I'll explain why in a second. But first and foremost, we need to have a referendum in Alberta, but we're going to go to Washington. We're going to discuss these things with members of the Trump administration, and then we're going to come back to Alberta and continue with APP's mission to educate Albertans on the benefits of independence and be able to spell out for them exactly what it would mean for citizens of Alberta if we were to vote to be independent of Canada, free of the multi-trillion-dollar debt that Trudeau's racked up through COVID and through his administration, free of the idiotic administration of the Trudeau Liberals, free of the influence of people in Ontario that don't even know where their oil comes from, and move forward as an independent state, or as an independent nation state, or an independent republic affiliated in an economic union with the United States, either as a U.S. territory, a U.S. state, or some other form of economic union. So those are the options that we're looking at pursuing.
And could you explain the differences and the benefits of becoming a U.S. territory versus becoming a U.S. state?
Well, the main reason that I had the benefit, like one of the members of our steering committee is a former member of Parliament who spent quite a bit of time researching this issue and has had the benefit of even discussing the issue with U.S. state governors like Sarah Palin. Who said, look, you have to understand that, Alberta might want to consider being a territory. Why is that? It's like, well, there were a lot of people in Alaska that didn't want to vote for statehood because one of the benefits of being a U.S. territory is you don't have to pay U.S. federal taxes. So were Alberta to vote independence from Canada, we wouldn't be paying Canadian federal income tax. We wouldn't be paying GST. We wouldn't be paying any federal excise taxes. Obviously, by agreement with the United States, there would be zero tariffs on any Alberta goods going into the United States. And of course, it would be, following President Trump's suggestion, it would be reciprocal free trade, zero tariffs on this side of the border, zero tariffs on that side of the border. And Alberta would be experiencing an economic boom unlike any that it's ever seen before. U.S. financial institutions would be free to come and locate in Alberta. They would be free to, free to open up branches in Alberta. We could, the Alberta dairy industry could expand, tenfold or 100-fold, whatever the market would bear, because we'd be free of, supply constraints, marketing board constraints, et cetera, et cetera. So, overall, the feeling is that this would be a huge positive for Alberta. And, we think that, having a conversation with our fellow Albertans about how much better our lives would be, free of federal income tax, free of GST, free of carbon tax, everybody wants to talk about the tariffs that the U.S. is putting on. What about the 20 some odd % increase in carbon tax that Trudeau's about to kick us in the teeth with, at the beginning of April? So, we'd be free from that foolishness as well, right? So there's a lot of benefits, we think, to exploring this idea. Obviously, this is a democratic process. Our fellow citizens are going to have a say. But we think that right now, with the sentiment in favor of Alberta independence in the province running between 20 and 34%, without any real attempt at public education, and without knowing fully what the United States would be willing to do for the independent Republic of Alberta, even without that information, these are the current numbers. So that's roughly between a million 750,000 Albertans currently, according to the polls, are in favor of independence. I would wager that support for it is much higher in rural Alberta, and certainly much higher amongst the Daniel Smith's base, out in rural Alberta. I think that obviously a lot of the left wing academics, all the same people that wanted to see us locked down during COVID, all of the people with socialist tendencies in the province, are going to have a tough time swallowing this. But, I think, honestly, given the ability to do this, given, a massive marketing budget for, and a carefully planned educational campaign leading up to a referendum, I think it wouldn't be that tough of a sell at this point in history to get more than 50% of Albertans to say, you know what, we've had enough. And we deserve to be prosperous, and we deserve to be decolonized from Quebec and Ontario. And it's time for us to stand on our own 2 feet and go our separate ways. And, if we have to use, the U.S. dollar, and if we have to have a U.S. passport instead of a Canadian passport, so be it. I mean, let's face it, if Alberta succeeded in declaring independence, the Canadian dollar would probably be trading on par with the Polish zloty. So, we'd want to be trading in U.S. dollars anyway. And obviously part of the discussions with the United States would be converting all Alberta pensions, savings, retirement funds, et cetera, at par with U.S. dollars, in order to make this happen. But, there's lots of things that need to be considered. And that's why, we're looking at sending an exploratory committee down to Washington to meet with the members of the Trump administration and to discuss, what is and isn't possible in the context of, what's, frankly, a fairly ambitious project.
The number one complaint or criticism that I've heard of this proposal is simply people saying that you're a traitor, that this idea is treacherous and traitorous. What is your response to that? My response to that is Canada left me a long time ago. So I don't really consider myself to be Canadian anymore. I think I largely consider myself to be an Albertan, full stop. Once Trudeau started seizing the bank accounts of single moms in Chilliwack when they supported the truckers convoy, when they declared martial law during COVID because they couldn't stand the thought of Albertans and their smelly diesel trucks and their dirty oil coming to Ottawa to express their displeasure with the manner in which we were being our rights were being trampled by a dictator in Ottawa. When all of that happened, I think like a lot of Albertans, I felt progressively less and less and less Canadian because whatever the ideals were of Canada have been thrown out the window. And I really don't think that any of us are Canadian anymore because what we used to take to be Canadian values have been completely shredded by the government we have in Ottawa right now. I know that most of the people involved in the delegation are currently keeping their names private, but can you give me a sense as to what type of coalition you're putting together here? Because we've spoken about this matter a number of times now, and it sounds like you have some former politicians interested in this project, maybe even some sitting Alberta MLAs.
Well, let's be clear. There's no such thing as a former politician, right? Like, what's the old line? It's a statesman is a dead politician. We need more statesmen. So let's just leave it at that. But no, I mean, we have former members of parliament. We have sitting MLAs that have expressed a great deal of interest in what we're doing and support for what we're doing. I literally just got off the phone with a retired justice who phoned me to express his support and congratulations for the work that we're doing, and saying that it's about time that we pursue this. Senior lawyers from retired from large Calgary law firms, Edmonton law firms, have been reaching out to me to tell me that they want to be part of this and they want to help. Senior oil and gas guys, billionaires. I mean, there's all kinds of people from every walk of life, farmers, ranchers. Certainly amongst all of my ranching buddies and farming buddies, I mean, this idea is wildly popular. So when that Premier Smith says, "Oh, I don't sense the enthusiasm for this idea," I don't think she's really in touch with her base right now, because the level of enthusiasm that I'm sensing from my phone ringing off the hook, and I guess we're pushing now 6 million views on that one little snippet. We've struck a chord with people. And I think there is real enthusiasm, in Alberta for this to happen. Obviously, there are people that are not happy with this. Our office has already been receiving death threats. So for that reason, I'm not disclosing the identities of any of the other members of the steering committee. And as we move forward, I'm sure that'll all become known in time. We're a bunch of very serious-minded Albertans that are all just completely fed up and have had enough with being governed by a bunch of idiots from Ontario and Quebec that don't even know where their oil comes from.
One of the most common questions I'm hearing right now from Albertans is, "I'm excited about this project. I'm interested. How can I help?" What's your response?
My response is, we're probably going to have to set up a website, but I would direct them to APP, direct them to the Alberta Prosperity Project. I would urge them to sign up. I would urge them to volunteer. There's a petition. What their APP is doing, they have a referendum project that they're currently working on, both with regard to an Alberta pension plan and with regard to Alberta sovereignty. Because of the way that Jason Kenney drafted the referendum petition bill, you have such a short window to get the signatures together. What we're trying to do is pre-gather all of the names and signatures so that we can, force a referendum within the 90-day period by having all the signatures preloaded. So if people want to volunteer with APP to help the Alberta Prosperity Project, to help in those endeavors, and to join APP, that right now off the top of my head is probably the best way that you can help. And I appreciate all the expressions of support that I've been getting from my fellow Albertans. I would urge people also that support this project to write to Premier Smith and email Premier Smith to say that this is, on an exploratory basis, this is something that citizens of Alberta are very interested in exploring, not necessarily committing to. You're not asking the government to commit to anything at this point. This is a democratic process. We're asking everybody to, deep breaths, behave themselves, no threats of violence, no misbehavior. We're doing this, by the book, by the numbers, under the current law of Canada, which contemplates a province leaving under the Quebec secession reference, contemplates a province being able to leave Confederation on a clear vote in a clear referendum on a clear question, and that's what we're working towards. And I would urge all of the people that think it's appropriate to call my office and utter death threats and all of these other types of behavior, to please stop doing that. We live in a civil society. This is a democratic process. And, we would urge you to start your own committees and, start working on the no campaign, because the yes campaign is going to be in full swing here shortly. And by the way, for all the people that have been phoning our office and issuing death threats, we'll be phoning the RCMP shortly, and investigations are going to commence.
When we last spoke, you mentioned that this delegation was hoping to go down to DC within the month. I'm wondering if that's still the plan. And secondly, it's very difficult to get meetings with high-level officials in the Trump administration. So what kind of access and what kind of meetings is your delegation actually going to be able to set up?
We're given the caliber of the people that are involved in the steering committee and the people that we're working with, we're working with people that have had previous contacts with. And again, I'm not going to be naming, the names of the people that we're contacting and that we're working with, but, that have had contacts at the highest level in, the United States government, as, former members of parliament, as, retired justices of courts in Canada, extremely successful Alberta oil and gas developers, real estate developers, etc. A lot of the people on the steering committee have those contacts already. Obviously, with this entire 30-second video clip going viral. This has gotten more and more and more attention in the United States. People from the U.S. have been reaching out to me for my contact information. The thing's taking on a life of its own, because I think clearly, on the American side of the border, people, in the United States see the clear benefit of an independent Alberta joining in an economic union and an economic partnership with the United States. I mean, obviously, we're not appreciated in Canada, so maybe it's time to to pack up our dirty oil and diesel trucks and go. And the good news is we don't even have to leave home.
And so, sorry, just that first question there. You're still planning on going within the month?
If you're talking within the month, being within the month of March, that might be a bit tight. I think when you and I were talking the other day, we sort of were working on a 30-day window. I mean, obviously, the steering committee that I'm working with, we're putting together briefing documents. We're putting together, packages for, to guide our discussions, with the American officials that we're going to be meeting with, and looking to move this project forward, and hopefully, just getting some answers to some of our questions. Is this even possible? I mean, this is an exploratory delegation to see whether or not anybody within the U.S. administration thinks that this makes sense. I suspect, listening to President Trump's State of the Union, or address to the joint Congress last night, where he basically shouted out his support for self-determination of Greenland. I would think that if that's his policy towards Greenland, I wouldn't imagine that he wouldn't extend the same policy to Alberta, given the fact that Alberta would be joining in an economic union with the United States, along with the third largest oil reserves in the known world. So, I think we're cautiously optimistic that there will be a high level of interest within the present administration to support Alberta independence.
Well, Jeff, thank you so much for your time today. And of course, I will be following this issue very closely. So I'm sure we'll be hearing from you again soon.
All right. Well, thank you very much.
All right, everyone. Well, thank you so much for tuning in to episode 1 of Rachel Parker. I hope you enjoyed my interview with Jeffrey Rath of Rath & Company. Please let me know what you thought of the interview in the comment section below. I know that a lot of you have questions about what is going on. Why did I leave True North? What is my new channel going to be about? What type of content am I going to be doing? I do plan on answering all those questions. We actually weren't planning on launching today. We had the launch date scheduled for a few weeks out. And due to just the breaking and explosive news that I reported on yesterday, I felt that we really had to hop on the momentum and make sure that we were getting some content out as soon as possible, because one of the main things about going independent is making sure that your audience can actually find you. And I suspect that will be an issue that we're going to have in the weeks to come. So please do share this content and send it to your friends and family, so people who have enjoyed my content in the past, or even people that you think would like it, know where to find me. And please do subscribe to my YouTube and like this video. And within the next few days or next week, I will give you guys a bit of an update about what's going on, what type of content we have planned for the future. You can expect to see a lot more of the same for me, a lot more interviews, but we also have some new and interesting things planned for you guys. Some of you have been asking me to upgrade my game a little bit. We also are going to be changing the studio around. Some of the things that I've ordered haven't arrived yet, so you guys are just going to have to be a bit patient with me. But as I said, I did really want to hop on this breaking explosive news. I hope you guys enjoyed the interview. As I said, please like this video and subscribe to my channel, and I'll be back with more content for you all soon. God bless.